across Canada are facing unprecedented challenge. President Trump is threatening steep and sweeping tariffs that will devastate Canada's economy on February 1st.
Since Donald Trump entered his second term as President of the United States, one of the most outspoken international critics of his America First economic agenda has come from an unlikely place, Ontario, Canada. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Doug Ford, the Premier of Canada's most populous province, has emerged as a leading voice pushing back against Trump's tariffs and combative trade policies. At a time when the White House has threatened to treat Canada as little more than an economic appendage of the US, with Trump even joking about making it the 51st state, Ford has positioned himself as a fierce defender of Canadian sovereignty, repeatedly telling American audiences that Canada is not for sale. Over the past several years, Ford has become a fixture on US cable news networks. His appearances are not limited to defending Ontario's trade interests but have also carried broader symbolic weight. He has cast himself as a standard bearer of Canada's resistance to Washington's aggressive economic nationalism. His combative rhetoric, sharp television presence, and willingness to confront Trump's policies head-on have ensured that his name resonates far beyond Canadian borders. But how did this Ontario politician, once primarily known for his family ties and controversial local politics, rise to become a prominent player on the North American stage? Doug Ford's trajectory is deeply rooted in his family's political and business legacy. Born into a household with both political ambition and entrepreneurial drive, Ford grew up in an environment where public service and commerce were intertwined. His father, Doug Ford Sr., was a successful businessman and also served as a member of Ontario's provincial legislature in the 1990s. This combination of political influence and private sector credibility left a lasting imprint on Doug Ford's worldview, instilling in him a belief that government should be run with the efficiency of a business and guided by the interests of everyday taxpayers. Perhaps more famously, Doug's older brother, Rob Ford, became an international figure during his turbulent tenure as mayor of Toronto from 2010 to 2014. Rob's populist style, larger-than-life personality, and blunt way of speaking endeared him to many working-class Torontonians, even as he courted scandal. The most infamous moment came in 2013 when video evidence surfaced of Rob smoking crack cocaine. Despite admitting to using the drug, he resisted calls to resign, and the episode irreparably damaged his reputation, leaving his mayoralty mired in controversy. After undergoing rehabilitation and returning to city politics as a council member, Rob Ford's career was tragically cut short when he succumbed to cancer in 2016. Doug Ford, who had long worked alongside his brother both in business and politics, stepped into the political vacuum. In 2018, just 2 years after Rob's death, Doug successfully campaigned to lead Ontario's Progressive Conservative Party. His pitch was straightforward yet effective. He portrayed himself as a businessman who understood the struggles of average Ontarians, someone unafraid to challenge elites whom he derided as sipping champagne with their pinkies in the air. His blunt promises to slash government waste and put the taxpayer first resonated with voters, propelling him into the premiership that same year. Observers in both Canada and the United States quickly noted the similarities between Doug Ford and Donald Trump. Both men cultivated populist images as outsiders willing to disrupt the political establishment, both relished combative rhetoric, and both leaned heavily on their business credentials. Ford's election night declaration that he would put an end to the government's party with the taxpayers' money echoed the same anti-elite fervor that had defined Trump's rise in U.S. politics. In fact, back in 2016, Ford had openly told Toronto's City News that he believed a Trump presidency would be a million times better than one led by Crooked Hillary, echoing Trump's favored nickname for Hillary Clinton. Yet Doug Ford's political evolution has revealed an interesting contrast. While Trump doubled down on partisan polarization, Ford gradually shifted toward a more pragmatic and bipartisan approach. Nowhere was this more evident than during the COVID-19 pandemic. Facing a public health crisis of unprecedented magnitude, Ford moved away from his earlier hyper-partisan instincts and sought common ground with Canada's federal government, which was led by Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Despite belonging to different parties and representing very different political traditions, Ford and Trudeau found ways to collaborate effectively, particularly in coordinating responses to the health emergency and economic fallout. One of the most notable alliances to emerge during this period was Ford's working relationship with Chrystia Freeland, then serving as Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. Their partnership was described by insiders as cordial, even warm, and it played a vital role in ensuring that Ontario's pandemic policies aligned with federal strategies. This willingness to cross partisan divides earned Ford a measure of respect not just in Ontario but across the country. It also softened his image, showing that beneath the bluster was a leader capable of pragmatism in times of crisis. Ford's political journey reflects the paradox of populist leadership in the 21st century. He rose to power by channeling anger against elites and mimicking elements of Trump's style, but his survival and relevance have depended on his capacity to adapt, compromise, and engage in coalition building. Today, as he continues to battle Trump's trade policies from north of the border, Ford embodies both the disruptive energy of populism and the more traditional Canadian instinct for diplomacy and balance. In this way, Doug Ford has transcended his early caricature as Canada's Trump and carved out a unique identity. He remains blunt, plainspoken, and unapologetically populist, but he is also a premier who has demonstrated that even the loudest critics of political elites sometimes recognize the necessity of cooperation when the stakes are high. And in standing up to Trump's America First doctrine, Ford has shown that his populism, unlike Trump's, is rooted in a deep sense of Canadian identity and sovereignty, a reminder that while the two leaders may share certain stylistic traits, their ultimate visions for their countries could not be more different. To understand why Doug Ford became such a prominent figure on U.S. television screens during Trump's second term, it's important to step back and examine the broader history of Canada-U.S. trade relations. Canada and the United States share the longest undefended border in the world, stretching over 8,800 kilometers. Their economies are deeply intertwined. More than 70% of Canada's exports go to the United States, while Canada is consistently one of the top 3 trading partners for the U.S. This relationship has historically been stable, even cooperative, but it has never been without tension. Disputes over lumber, dairy, and steel have flared repeatedly over the decades. The 1980s saw heated negotiations over the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, later expanded into NAFTA in 1994 with Mexico's inclusion. Each agreement deepened economic ties but also left Canadian leaders sensitive to accusations of being overly dependent on their southern neighbor. Donald Trump's America First agenda reignited those old anxieties. Trump campaigned on the claim that trade deals like NAFTA were unfair to American workers, and once in office, he slapped tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, arguing that Canadian imports threatened U.S. national security. For Canadians, this justification was not only economically damaging but insulting, given the two countries' long-standing alliance in NATO and beyond. Trudeau's federal government naturally led the official response, but Trump's aggression created political space for provincial leaders like Doug Ford to step forward. As Premier of Ontario, home to Canada's industrial heartland, including steel towns like Hamilton, Ford had a direct stake in the fight. Workers in his province were the ones most threatened by Trump's tariffs. Appearing on American news channels, Ford blasted the policies as unjust and short-sighted, insisting that Canadian goods strengthened, not undermined, the North American economy. His repeated refrain, "Canada is not for sale," resonated as both an economic defense and a patriotic rallying cry. What surprised many was not that Ford spoke out, but how effectively he did so. While his populist style once drew skepticism among international observers, it now seemed well suited for American media, where blunt soundbites often carry more weight than polished speeches. U.S. cable networks, always hungry for fiery commentary, gave Ford a platform, and he seized it. His presence on American airwaves turned him into an unlikely counterweight to Trump, a role few would have predicted when Ford first took office. Ford's clashes with Trump over trade highlight a deeper shift in his political career, the move from pure populist firebrand to pragmatic leader. When he first ran for premier, Ford's rhetoric drew direct comparisons to Trump. His promises to slash spending, his antagonism toward elites, and his willingness to pick fights with critics all fit the mold. But governing Ontario, with its complex mix of urban and rural interests, forced him to adopt a broader approach. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this transformation. At a moment when Ontarians looked for steady leadership, Ford surprised skeptics by working closely with federal leaders, even those from opposing parties. His partnership with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland stood in stark contrast to Trump's often combative relationship with his own political opponents. Ford praised Freeland's work ethic, describing her as a great partner, and their collaboration helped coordinate aid packages, public health measures, and supply chain protections during